In this video lesson, we're going to discuss a subdivision of the quarter note called an eighth note. In order to fully understand eighth notes, you must first be familiar with whole notes, half notes, and quarter notes. If you are not, please take the time to review our previous video on rhythm before proceeding. We already know that a whole note sounds for 4 beats, a half note sounds for 2 beats, and a quarter note for only 1 beat. Just like a half note is half of a whole note, a quarter note is half of a half note. In the same sense, an eighth note is half of a quarter note. This simply means that just like it takes 2 half notes to fill the same amount of time as 1 whole note, and 2 quarter notes to fill the same amount of time as 1 half note, it will take 2 eighth notes to fill the same amount of time as 1 quarter note or beat. 2 eighth notes equals 1 quarter note. Now you may be thinking, how am I supposed to count half of a beat? It's actually quite simple. In a situation like this, the first eighth note in any given beat is counted as the beat, meaning 1, 2, 3, or 4. This is known as the downbeat because it is the strongest part of the beat. The second eighth note in any given beat is known as the upbeat and is counted by saying the word and. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. Remember when counting eighth notes that each note accounts for 2 equal halves of a beat, none shorter or longer than the other. Count your eighth notes as evenly as possible without shortening or elongating the beat. To further explain, let's take a look at a couple of measures which incorporate eighth notes. In the first measure, we see that beats 1, 2, and 4 contain quarter notes, and beat 3 contains 2 eighth notes. The first eighth note in measure 3 will be counted as downbeat 3, and the second eighth note will be counted as the upbeat and, like this. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Notice how when counting the eighth notes in beat 3, I counted them slightly quicker than I counted the quarter notes. That's only because it takes 2 eighth notes to fill up the same amount of time as 1 quarter note. Do not confuse this with speeding up the beat. The tempo of the beat remains the same throughout the entire measure. Let's take a look at measure 2. In measure 2, beats 1 and 4 contain quarter notes, and beats 2 and 3 are each divided into 2 equal halves or eighth notes. Let's count. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. This is an eighth rest. Wherever there is an eighth rest, you should remain silent for half of a beat. Just like an eighth note, an eighth rest could occur on either the downbeat or the upbeat. Let's take a look at a few examples. In this first measure, beat 3 has an eighth note on the downbeat and an eighth rest on the upbeat. This simply means that you should play the first half of beat 3, but remain silent for the second half, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, in the second measure, the eighth note and the eighth rest are switched. On beat 2, the downbeat this time contains an eighth rest, and the upbeat contains an eighth note. With this, you remain silent through the first half of the beat and come back in with the word and on the upbeat. 1, and 3, 4. Let's put the 2 measures together so we can hear it as a whole. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and 3, 4. In this next example, we see that the very first note on the downbeat of beat 1 is an eighth note. Now, the upbeat of beat 1 contains a quarter note. You might be thinking, how is this possible if a quarter note sounds for 1 beat and we already have an eighth note in that beat? Wouldn't that be extending the beat? Actually, the answer is no. We already know that quarter notes can be played from downbeat to downbeat, meaning from beat 1 to beat 2, beat 2 to beat 3, etc. Quarter notes can also be counted from upbeat to upbeat. Whenever there is an eighth note or an eighth rest on the first half of a beat followed by a quarter note on the upbeat, that quarter note sounds from the upbeat of that beat to the upbeat of the very next beat, like this. 1, and 3, 4. Now that you have an understanding of what an eighth note is, in the next video lesson, I will begin to talk about a further subdivision of the quarter note called a 16th note. But before you move on, don't forget to check out 5minutemozart.com for free helpful practice sheets and more in-depth explanations of everything discussed in this video.